My full name is Frederick Hilbert Martens. It's spelled M-A-R-T-E-N-S.
And your birthday?
I was born on December the 15th, 1921 in Peoria, Illinois.
Your enlistment date, Fred,
was August the 11th, 1942.
And your discharge date?
Was September 18th, 1945. And my enlisted serial number was 16104-285, and my officer's number was 02071653.
As we go into another election year, a great deal will be said about the state of our nation at home and abroad. Democrats, Republicans, and Independents will urge the American voters to follow their political agenda. And in November, it will be we, the voters, that will decide the best program for our nation. As in any election, very little is said about the men and women who are given the task of ensuring our nation's ever-changing role in national security. That job is always delegated to the Americans that serve our country's armed forces. Over the past century, hundreds of thousands of these brave men and women have given their lives, and millions more have received physical and psychological wounds as a result of their duty to secure our way of life. Over the decades, Hollywood and the American media have spent a considerable amount of time displaying and honoring the actions of these Americans, and rightfully so. They do this so that we never forget the sacrifice that comes along with our American birthright. Today, I am honored to have as my guest one of these distinguished individuals, and even more honored that our interview will be put in the records of the Library of Congress. Please join me in welcoming Air Force veteran Fred Martens. Fred, you were born you said in the early 20s, right?
That's right.
So, and that was in Peoria,
Illinois. That was Peoria, Illinois.
And your parents, they were?
My parents were second generation Germans. My grandfather and grandmother both came over from Germany, and my mom and dad both were born in Peoria. My brother and I also. We lived there all my life. Well, lived there until I was called into the service.
What did your parents do while you were, growing up?
Well, my father was a painting contractor, and my mother was a housewife.
Did he paint any things, of any interest in Peoria?
Well, what they liked to paint were churches. They did the most beautiful job of decorating these Gothic style churches, and some of them the painting they did continued to last well into the 50s and 60s.
So he was a ladder painter. He had to go up the ladder and.
Oh yes.
Oh, really?
He went up the ladder.
Did you ever help him?
Yes, I did. And I went up and I helped paint our church, the St. Paul's Lutheran. And my job then was to get 2 buckets of clean water and walk along this scaffold and put the 2 buckets down, grab the 2 dirty buckets that the other painters had used, take those down, take them down to the basement, empty them, fill them up with clean water, and walk up again and out that.
Now, how far up were you when you were doing this?
About 30 feet.
Really?
Yeah. It was a tall Gothic church. And a number of years later, I was in that church, and I have to admit that I wasn't paying that much attention to the sermon. But I was looking up there, and I saw where that scaffold was. I could no more have done that at that time than I could have flown.
You had brothers and sisters?
I had one older brother.
I take it he used to paint too.
No.
Really?
He managed to get out of it. When he got into high school, he got a job at the sewage disposal plant. was a real good job, and he was lucky to have it. But Dad never had to call on him to work, so I did all of the.
So did you get paid in those days?
Well, I got paid. I didn't get paid enough, but it was more like an allowance, really. But
you must have been close to your dad then.
yeah,
Yeah.
my dad and I got along real well.
Good, good. Now, I take it, I mean, that wasn't your lifelong job. Before entering the military, what did you do between painting and signing up?
Well, I was enrolled in Bradley. At that time, it was Bradley Polytechnic Institute. It's since been changed to Bradley University. But I was going to school, and I was majoring in physics, and that was my major interest in life. And but I helped my dad on Saturdays and during the summer and everything like that.
Did your dad or any of the other family members serve in the military, or did they have an inkling to go in?
Well, my brother was called into the military later. I had two second cousin. No, I had several cousins who were serving in the military.
Did your brother go to school with you?
Yes, he was 2 years ahead of me.
Okay.
He studied chemistry. I studied physics.
Were you enlisted? Did you join, or were you drafted? I don't.
Well,
tell me this. Did they have a draft at that time?
Oh, that draft was breathing hard down the back of my neck. But they had this program. It was the Air Cadet program. And what you did is you went down and you enlisted, and then you could stay in school. They said until you graduate. Well, I knew that wasn't 100% true, but nevertheless, I could stay in school for a while. I went down and enlisted in the Air Corps with their Air Cadet program.
You know, that was pre-Air Force.
That was
the United States Air Force.
I was not in the Air Force. The Air Force did not exist in those days.
Right.
What I was in was the Army Air Corps. So I enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and the deal was that I would stay in school until I graduated, or until they needed me, whichever came first. And then I would go into flight training, be commissioned as a second lieutenant, and then go over and serve. Well, I got about a year in school following that, and that was great. There were some advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages was that by that time I had a real good job with the Department of Agriculture. They had a research laboratory there in Peoria, and that was one of the best jobs, part-time that a student could have. However, the Air Force or Air Corps demanded I do a lot of studying, stay in school. I could not take a summer vacation.
Did they while you were at Bradley, did they pay for your schooling?
No.
No, they did not.
No, they didn't pay for anything until I got on that train on I think it was August 11th of '43.
So you enlisted. So did you enlist to beat the draft, or did you enlist because you wanted to be in the Air Corps?
Both.
Okay.
Okay, my enlisting was not without some self-interest. I mean, if they had drafted me, I'd have probably gone into the infantry, and I didn't see how the things that I would do in the infantry would really help me. See, I was studying physics. I wanted to be a physicist or scientist of some kind, and I just didn't see that would help me as much as flying. I signed up with the idea of being a navigator, because you'd learn astronomy and.
Did you have some options? I mean, could you have been a pilot or?
Yes. After we went through basic training.
And where was that at?
That was at Shepherd Field, Texas. And, that was a horrible place.
We'll get back to that.
Okay. Well, anyway, after basic training, and then I spent a little bit of time at a special detachment, but I got down to pre-flight, and in pre-flight they put you through all kinds of tests, and they had a system called Stay 9. I don't know just what the Stay 9 meant, but anyway, you were rated 1 to 9 on all the different things. Well, I qualified at 9 on both Bombardier and Navigator, and I think I only rated 8 on pilot. So they put me in the navigation school.
So you were getting back to basic training. So you went to Shepherd Field for basic training, and what happened? I mean, you got on the Rock Island.
I got on the Rock Island. We didn't know where we were going, and we got up to Chicago, and there was a guy met us, and then he put us on a train that headed toward Texas.
Did you spend any time in Chicago while you recall that?
No, I mean it was a few hours.
Oh, really?
They said, well, be ready to go here immediately, but it always takes a couple of hours. We didn't leave they didn't let us leave the station or anything like that. So anyway, we got on this troop train. It was the dirtiest. It was something that they pulled out. It had been scrapped before the war. But when the war came, they pulled out a lot of these cars that had been scrapped and used them in the troop trains. It was dirty and it was uncomfortable, and it had that old mohair on it that had outlived its useful life.
How many inductees were on the train?
Well, I think the car was fairly full, and I don't know. I think there were probably...
Were these all airmen going to the same...
They were all going down to Shepherd Field. So this car was pulled into
now,
which...
How old were you, by the way?
By that time I was 21.
Were you like middle of the road, youngest, or one of the oldest, or...?
No, I was middle of the road of that bunch.
Mm-hmm.
So, and anyway, it took us down to Wichita Falls, Texas, and then they loaded us onto a big truck, took us out to Shepherd Field, and then it started. And we were assigned to the tender mercies of a Sergeant Wasik.
I knew one of those guys. That's why I'm laughing.
And he was a good old boy. I mean, he was a hillbilly, and he had an accent, and he yelled at us, and he kept us in line. And I've never met anybody like him before or since. And but anyway, we got there, and we were marched over to the supply depot and given us all of our goods and everything in 2 barrack bags. And we pulled the drawstrings up on those barracks bags, tied them together, and flung them off on the shoulder. Well, I forgot to say, we also were given an overcoat. It's the heaviest overcoat I have ever owned in my whole life. So we had to put the overcoat on, but now that was a good thing because it kept the straps from cutting into your shoulder. So anyway, we had about a half a mile to march back to the barracks, carrying those things. And we'd march back a couple hundred yards, set those things down, rest a little bit, put them up on the other shoulder, and finally made it back to the barracks.
Now, how long were you at Shepherd Field?
I was at Shepherd Field for 8 weeks. There's 6 weeks of regular basic training, and after that we were waiting for an assignment to the next place that we went.
Did you get any, being in the Air Corps, did you get any specialized training while you were there? I mean,
No.
So it's just
It
teach
was
how to be
all-
a soldier, right?
There was about 2 hours of calisthenics, 2 hours of close order drill, and all kinds of things. Then we had to go through the obstacle course, and we would take the 5-mile marches. That may have been a little bit different. 5 miles was the longest march we ever had on that. But it was strictly infantry basic. And so then after we got through the basic training, those of us who hadn't shipped out they had 1 day of KP and then 2 days off.
Were you allowed to go off base and have any social life?
No.
No.
As a matter of fact, all the bases that I was assigned to, it's probably better to stay on the base. There was more to do.
I take it you were single at the time?
I was single at the
Did you
time.
have a gal back home?
Oh yeah. Right a little after the war, I married her. We're still married.
Good. Wow.
60 years.
Wow. God bless you.
So, everybody was single, or if they had wives, they were still back home living with their parents.
So, I mean, how did you personally feel? I mean, about the switchover from just being a civilian. Now you're sequestered in this.
Oh, that was
with Sergeant Hillbilly.
Sergeant Wassig. Yeah, that was a very difficult transition. It was really a very difficult transition, but I managed to get through it. And I mean, all of the fellows from Bradley that I went in with managed to get through it. They all qualified as something or other.
What was the mood of the American people at that time, or the country? As you were doing.
They were very patriotic. I mean, it was, boy, let's go get the Germans. We'll get those Japs, and we'll, And President Roosevelt, it says, he gave a talk the day after Pearl Harbor, and he says, unconditional surrender. And that's what we were going for. And so by the time I got into...
Were you surprised that Pearl Harbor was bombed the way it was? I mean, did it really take America by...
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had no idea. I mean, the Japanese had sent over envoys to talk to people, in Washington, and they were discussing America was cutting off some of their needed supplies because they didn't like what the Japanese were doing. But they had envoys discussing the whole situation, and to have this happen, the Pearl Harbor was bombed, the Philippines were bombed and overrun and everything. That was a real surprise.
Was there any really thinking of the American public at that time that they would actually go to war had that not happened?
There were people who said we should go to war. Mm-hmm. The idea was mainly that we should go over to war in Europe. Because, most of the people in the United States had come, had roots in Europe, and they knew what was happening over there, and they felt that we should go over and take out Hitler and his...
So that was becoming a more foregone conclusion for young men at your time?
I think most of us felt that at some time or other there might be a war. Mm-hmm. But...
So you left Shepherd Field, and what happened next?
Well, I went up to Ellensburg, Washington, and they had a college detachment up there. Now, what they told us was that the reason to have this college detachment was to equalize the educational level of the cadets so that they could then go through the advanced training. Well, the real reason was that they had to have a place to park us while they got ready to have us in one of the advanced programs. Well, I didn't care. Boy, that Ellensburg was wonderful. I mean, it was late summer. There were the trees were filled with apples, and it was beautiful. And it was a teacher's college. And when I got there, the fall semester had not started, and so there were 2 classes ahead of me, in the school. And one day in September, why, we woke up and got out, and here they were, girls. Now, none of us.
That was my next question. Did your girlfriend or your family get to visit you up there?
No.
Oh.
I didn't see my. Well, I'll get to that a little bit later. Boy, there were hundreds of beautiful girls. All bright, beautiful, and everything. It was great to have somebody to talk to besides these guys that you were training with. So that was real great.
Were you trained on a specific type of aircraft, or they didn't?
At this
stage, it was just
at
navigation?
this time. They gave us 8 hours in a Piper Cub or something similar to that. But most of the guys would probably end up as pilots, but this was just starting their training, and they wanted to see how well we would do and everything. So we had that training, and then we had classes in meteorology and map reading and these different things, aeronautics, and a little bit of military law and that. So
but you weren't really sequestered like you were at boot camp. I mean, you were able to get out and.
Well, the school was right out in the middle of the town, and we could get out and everything like that. Go
to the movies.
Yeah, and everything's just fine. So anyway.
So how long did that last?
Well, it didn't last for me very long.
It could have lasted longer.
I had several years of college already, and as a matter of fact, I was tutoring some of these people, and then the people who ran the thing decided, well, heck, he doesn't need any more education. He's got more than most of them. So they shipped me off. They put me in one class ahead. They moved me up one class and shipped me out to Santa Ana, California, where they had pre-flight. And pre-flight was one of these places. They tried to make it like West Point or Annapolis or something like that. All the spit and polish and everything, and you got gigged for a dirty belt buckle, and you had to have everything just exactly.
Were you commissioned at that time?
Oh no,
okay.
No. We were still just starting. And here's where we went through all kinds of tests to see, what we would qualify for. Well, as I said before, I qualified for Bombardier or Navigator, and I got put in the Navigator program. So, but it was a sorting procedure that they went through there. Now, one of the things that happened there in pre-flight was I had there were some good family friends who lived near there, and they invited me, and they told me to bring a friend of mine over, and we would spend Christmas with them, which was really wonderful. So we went over and had Christmas in a home setting, and these were, I don't think they were relatives, they were good friends, and so everything was fine. But then we got on the train to come back to to the base, and something happened and that train broke down. And so we were late getting in to the base. So this, this gives you all kinds of demerits and everything like that. Fortunately, the people who ran the train called up the commanding officer and says, "Hey, it's our fault that these guys didn't make it back to the base." And so he didn't give us any, he erased the demerits and everything from our records. But he had the problem of who's going to stand guard duty on New Year's Eve.
Oh,
so
I know you guys did.
So anyway, he had these guys who came in late. We couldn't argue. So anyway, there I was, New Year's Eve. I had this unloaded rifle. I had 2 bullets in something on my vest. Out there in the middle of the night, I was just as lonesome and unhappy and as I could be, standing there with an unloaded rifle, guarding against a non-existent enemy in the middle of a shooting war. And that's how I started 1944.
Wow. So you finished your training, and then what happened?
I thought I'd go directly to navigation school, but then they sent me to Kingman, Arizona for gunnery school. Now, gunnery school was fine. It was like being in one of these arcades. As a matter of fact, a lot of these games that the kids are playing now started there in the gunnery schools. And they had all kinds of things to teach us, how to lead the plane, the enemy plane coming in, and all kinds of things like that. And we also got to go up in a B-17 up to 30,000 feet and fire at attacking planes. There was they had two different ways of counting your score. Some of them you could fire wooden bullets that were dipped in paint, and so if your color for that day was green, why they counted the number of green dots and gave it to your.
That's where paintballing came from, huh?
Yeah,
yeah.
And
that's something.
And they had some camera. They would photograph the incoming plane and tell whether you were on it or not. But that was a lot of fun. And then they had all of the different kinds of turrets. They have a big ball turret in the underside of
the belly, yeah.
of the belly of the 24s and 17s, and then they had the top turret and the tail gun and everything like that. We got to shoot all of those things.
Really?
And it was fun. And we did a lot of shooting at just light, and if you were aimed at the light and hit it, why, it recorded. So, you go in there now. I hear these in some of these places where they go ding, 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 ding. Well, that started in World War II.
Laser tag.
And I got in on it. Now, one day, my friend Bob Stevenson and I were assigned to man the high-level skeet tower. Well, there were several towers, but anyway, we climbed up 30 feet to this tower. And
you were used to that because you were a painter, of course.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that didn't bother me a bit. I got up there. It didn't bother me a bit at that time. But we got up there, and we would put the 2 clay pigeons on this thing, and it had a strong spring, and the arm would come out and fling them out. And that would give the guys down on the ground time enough to aim at these pigeons, and they had shotgun barrels mounted on there and fire at them. So anyway, something happened in the this arm malfunctioned, and it then released, and it hit me right here, and it broke this fourth metacarpal. And so they put me in the hospital till that got healed. Well, I was there for about a week or two. After the second day, it got mighty boring. And so I said, hey, you know, I might as well go home and heal this thing. And they said, well, okay, we'll let you. So I went home, and my good friend George, he had been my best buddy all the time. He hadn't come up in this interview yet, but he was there. So we had all kinds of fun. Now, one of the things, you know, Dad had a car, so we had wheels, and they had a lot of they rationed everything, especially gasoline.
Have you been commissioned yet?
Oh, no. I was just, well, I was an air cadet, which meant that I got an extra $25 a month, but that was my rank, air cadet. So I got the $75 a month pay. But I got to go through gunnery school and navigation school before I get commissioned.
Oh my God.
So anyway, I was home. George was home, and I had a good friend whose father ran a gas station. Well, this father.
Now let me ask you something. When you're home on leave and you got the uniform on and everything else, I mean,
Right.
people how do they treat you? I mean,
They treated me real great, real great. You know, this.
you got a lot more girls on your arm?
Not really.
No?
Not really. You know, you were treated very, very nicely. Yeah, there was none of this like they had at the end of the Vietnam War or anything like that. I mean,
A little different.
yeah, but anyway, we were home on that leave, and I went back and finished up gunnery school, and I was sent to Hondo, Texas. Now, do you know where Hondo, Texas is?
No.
Have you heard of Hondo, Texas?
No. I'm going to look it up after today, though. I can tell you
Okay,
that.
it's 40 miles due west of San Antone. Well, anyway, I got into navigation school in Hondo, Texas, and it was a very rigorous course. It was interesting. I thought it was very, very interesting. I mean, map reading, we learned all about, we could identify the stars and do dead reckoning and radio-assisted navigation. And we took 25 flights in it was called an advanced trainer. It was 2-engine AT-10. And we took 25 flights in that. We had several night flights where we were supposed to shoot the stars and things like that. But the most interesting flight that I took was we had one cross-country flight, which was supposed to be about 6 hours long. And our pilot, who knew the ropes at that time, he decided that he was going to fly to Reno, Nevada. And one of the reasons he was going to fly to Reno, Nevada was that he flew directly over the Grand Canyon. So we got in there, and we flew through, and we had the most gorgeous view. It was a beautiful day, and we had the most gorgeous view of almost all the length of the canyon, that section there where it heads east. So Now I've been able to see the Grand Canyon. We visited. I've visited from the north bank and from the south bank, and we took a raft trip down through the water. So I've seen it from every direction you can look at it, and I can see that thing. So, but anyway, we had that, and then we did the same thing coming back, which I thought was really great.
How long? What was the total length of your training from the time you left on the train?
Okay, until the time I got my commission. Let's see, I left in July, and I got my commission in September. So it was 14 months. Okay. And so then I figured, okay, I am here. I've had gunnery training. They will probably assign me to a bomber. It might be an intermediate or a light bomber or some heavy. So what did they do? They put me in the troop transport command. And the troop transport command was flying C-47s. These are unarmed transport. I mean, the biggest gun we had on that thing was a 45 that all the officers carried. So anyway,
how many troops did the C-47 carry at that time?
I think about 25. Mm-hmm. And
it was like a DC-3, right?
It's exactly a DC-3, except it was painted olive drab and it
given a new name.
Under a new name and the different seats in it. So I got sent up there to Bear Field in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we were there several weeks. And we were checking out, there were a number of brand new C-47s. And we got in there, we could customize them for ourselves and everything. And, make them the way we wanted them, because we thought we would have those,
throughout the war.
Throughout the war. Well, everything is fine, and we had a lot of fun. I got home several times during, that wasn't too far from Peoria. But I got home. We finished up there at we were given a briefing, and we flew down to Miami, Florida. No, we flew down to West Palm Beach, Florida. And I forgot the name of the field, but it's now West Palm International. Big airport now. But then the next morning we went out to take off to fly to Cuba. And we had been briefed and everything. And when we got there, we found out that the crew chief had not set the brakes properly. And when he was revving up the engine, the plane moved forward and hit a small tree and put a dent in the nose cone. So anyway, we would not fly with our, that squadron. So anyway, we said, well, we thought, if you give me a hammer, I'll pound that thing out.
So are you stuck now in West Palm, or are you in Cuba now?
I'm now stuck in West Palm.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, they made us pull off all our personal belongings off the plane, and they put us on a train to go to New York, where we would get on an Air Transport Command flight over to Europe. Well, they didn't want to take our foot lockers. So anyway, we put our names and everything on there, and the guy says, well, as soon as you get assigned someplace, within a couple of weeks we'll have your foot locker there. So we took the train up to New York, and I managed to meet my brother there, and we had the afternoon and evening together. By that time, I was a second lieutenant. He was a staff sergeant. I figured, okay, I'm going to talk to him, and I'm going to find out what this guy is doing. Because he never did say anything about it, what he was doing. And I was curious. Well, anyway, we got through the whole session without me finding out one doggone thing. But, so then I got...
You found out later, and we'll get into that.
Oh, yeah, I found out later. Very, very much so. So anyway, I got on this troop transport, or air transport command flight over to Europe. And we flew over there. And the navigator, now it wasn't me, but it was the cruise navigator, he didn't quite make their designated airport that they were flying into. So, but at that time, England had thousands of little airfields, so they found an airfield that they could put down on. So they put down on on that airfield, and they found us a place in the barrack to spend the rest of the night. And they fed us breakfast the next morning, which was very nice of them.
While you were there, I mean, for the brief amount of time you were there, did you get a experience of how the country England was handling the war effort at that time?
No.
Or did you? No.
No, we didn't. I really didn't. But they were doing they put up with it as best they could. So anyway, they sent me down to London, and I found a responsible Air Corps officer who was supposed to tell me where to go. And but it took him a couple of days to figure out what to do with me. But they put me up in a pension, or I had my room, and it was very nice, and I got to go all over. I got up in the Parliament building.
And where is that? You're close to London?
I'm in London.
In London.
In London. I got in the Parliament.
Is that going to be was that your service station or your duty station?
No, that's just until they find out what they're going to do with this guy who came out of nowhere. So I got to see Big Ben, and I walked up there, and I don't know why they didn't have guards, kicking me out, but I saw all the mechanism of Big Ben, and it was really fantastic. And I got, the different parks and places like that. So I had a good tour of London. But then I had to report back every morning, and one morning they said, well, you're going out to the 80th Squadron that's stationed in Greenham Common. And so that was about 40 miles west of London. So I got on the train and got off at a little town called Newbury.
Was there any bombing going on in London at that time?
No, I didn't. I think this was too late in the war. And now Greenham Common, after the war, they stationed some of the nuclear-armed aircraft there. And it got a lot of notoriety because the women were there protesting and trying to block the gates and everything like that. But that happened long after I left. So we got there, and then we started. The main thing that we did was to carry supplies over to the continent, and close, up as close to the front lines as we could get.
And where exactly did you land? When you say continent, are we talking France?
We're talking France and Belgium.
Belgium.
Because they weren't all that far into the continent at that time. It was.
As you were doing this, did you experience any German interference?
We got German interference only twice, and in one of these incidents, we lost a plane and the crew. but we really didn't get very much interference. I think what happened on these two occasions was that there was a German pilot coming back who still had a little gas and ammunition and saw some easy targets. But
So when you flew, I take it you flew in formation, and how many C-47s were in your formation?
well, there were always 3, and sometimes 6 or 9. But
And you were carrying either recruit replacements or cargo?
it was almost all cargo. Almost all cargo. And a little bit later on, we started carrying fuel up to General Patton. And that made us a little bit nervous because this was all high-octane gasoline, and it came on board in the form of these 5-gallon jerry cans.
Really?
So the whole floor of the plane was filled with these jerry cans, and we would fly up, and this was a little bit later on after we had moved over to France. But it was primarily moving equipment.
Did you? You said that the combat you saw was the brief encounters with the Luftwaffe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So when now you're over in France, I mean, how much flight time did you put in over there? I mean, was it like a sortie every other day, or?
There was at least, well, we flew every 3rd day, and a sortie was taking off and landing. That was a sortie, and sometimes we made as many as 6 sorties a day, and we would fly if there was something fairly close. We would fly.
You stay with the same flight crew throughout the entire time?
Well, I was assigned to. I mean, there were more pilots than there were navigators, or more pilots than there were navigators. I flew with all the different pilots.
Have you kept in touch with these folks over the years?
No, and when we get to the end of I'll explain that.
All right.
Why?
How about your family? I mean, how did you keep in touch with them? I mean, that had to be some trials and tribulations.
Well, you could write letters, but then they had a way. If you wrote a letter, it took a little while for it to go back. First, they had to have a space on a boat going back, but they had what they called V-mail, and V-mail. It was I think it was about a 6x8 sheet, and at the top you had your name and or their name and address and everything, and you had where you could write about a little 2-paragraph letter, and then they took that and they microfilmed those, and sent the microfilm back. With a returning aircraft of some kind. And then when it got back to the United States, why, then it was developed into a sheet and put in a little envelope. The little envelope was only about 3 by 4 inches and sent to the addressee.
Precursor to the internet, huh?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So they did. You wrote on those. Most of the writing that you did was on that.
Wow. So now you're over there. I mean, do you have free time? I mean, do you?
Oh yeah, you have free time.
And what did you do? Not that you could do a lot, but what did you do with your free time?
Well, you went into town and had a beer or some brown ale, as they called it, brown ale, which I really didn't care for. But you could get off and now one of the things that we could do was go in and take a bath, because there really wasn't very good facilities on the base, but and especially in France, they had these baths. You go in and they drew you a tub full of good hot water, and you could wash and get all the dirt off of you, and you really feel good. Then you go on out over with a couple of your friends who you'd come with, and go. You could always get some champagne in France. And
Did you ever have, I mean, I don't know if they had it then, did you have like USO programs or?
Yeah. Bob Hope came and visited us once when we were in Amiens. And he had Francis Langford with him, and Jerry Colonna.
Wow.
And they put on a program, and it was practically impossible for anybody. It was so crowded. But they had a real good time, and
Funny guy, huh?
oh, funny guy. And Jerry Colonna was just a riot, and Francis Langford, was exceptionally beautiful, especially to us who hadn't seen a really good-looking woman for months.
How about movies? Did they have movies for
Oh
you?
yeah, we always had movies at different places, and that was a major type of entertainment we had, were the movies.
How long were you in Europe? Your total time.
I was only in Europe. I got there in December, and I left in August.
When the war finally came to an end, where were you? I mean,
We were in Amiens, and we had been flying, and you'd hear all of these newscasts, about where our troops were, and they had linked up with the Russians at different places, and I wonder, why in the heck is Hitler holding out? Why doesn't he just, why doesn't somebody in that outfit say, hey, enough is enough? But they held on, and finally, I think it was May 8th, they had the surrender and ceasefire. That night, they had scheduled me for a training mission to go fly over Europe. I was flying over Europe, and when we looked down, practically every place we found these these GIs had managed to get belts of tracer bullets, and the whole country was lit up with these tracers. So
made it a little difficult for flying, I bet.
well, we worried a little bit, but they weren't really going up.
So when it came time for you to return home, did you fly back on your plane, or did you?
Yeah, we flew back on our plane, but we had a time which I consider really more or as important, the time after VE Day until we left. And in this what we did very often would fly displaced persons from Western Europe over to a town in Germany. It's called Halle, Halle. It was on the Rhine River. And we would have 26 of these displaced persons, and we would take them over, land there, and exchange them for 26 other people who had been moved from the east to the from the west to the east.
When you say displaced, are these civilians?
These are civilians who the Nazis did not want a lot of interference with their goings-on. So they would displace these people. It would be like taking half the farmers from Will County and moving them down to Texas, and moving the guys from Alabama up into Will County and things like that. They just move these people around. so that they didn't know enough about the locale to really cause trouble. And they displaced hundreds of thousands of people.
How many people did you hook up back to?
Well, it was 26 people on each flight, and I've forgotten how many flights, but
Would you say scores or hundreds?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was, to you, that seems, in our conversation, it seems to be, a pretty big.
I thought that was really rather important.
And I have to think that these people were, really grateful.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were very grateful. And there was one fella who had a cane. Now, everybody over in Europe, all the men have these canes, and when they go someplace on vacation, they get a little metal badge, and they tack it onto the cane. So anyway, this guy was so grateful that he made me take his cane that he had kept
Wow, do you still
all
have
through
it?
that. I still have.
Very good.
Yeah. I mean, my kids are going to keep that. So
Good for you.
anyway, so we did that a lot of times, and we carry on a number of occasions. We carried the walking wounded. Now, there were a number of the troop carrier planes that were outfitted with cots. I think there were about there weren't 12 cots on each. There were about 9 cots on each side, and they would put the injured who couldn't walk or were on stretchers. They put those and carried back directly to hospitals either in Western France, or some of them took them up to England or so, where they could, have real good hospital, or the best available hospital care.
How much after VE Day were you notified that you're going to be going home?
Well, May, June, July, and August. We were there 4 months, and we did as much flying during those 4 months as I did before.
Sure.
Carrying all kinds of.
So what was your first thought? They said, "Okay, Lieutenant, you're on your way home."
Yeah. Now, that's fine, but I did not interpret it as you're on your way home. I interpreted it as you're going over to Japan.
Oh.
We still
I
had.
didn't think about that.
Yeah. Well, I did.
I bet you did.
I did. But the thing is, we went. We got 30 days rest and recuperation, and then we were to report back to and prepare to go to Japan.
When you finally get back to the States now, are you close to home? Did you
No, we landed in Massachusetts, Westover Field in Massachusetts. And so then we unloaded and
Don't worry about it.
We got off, and we got the papers and everything, and we were on our 30 days. So I hopped on the first train I could get to Chicago on a train, and then I could take that Rock Island rocket, and I'd be home. So
Same thing that got you started.
same thing that got me started. So anyway, I get home, and my brother's there.
What kind of reception do you receive? Well, now you're walking back, you're home, you've been gone a while. I mean, does this town people, do they treat you like a hero? I mean,
No, they didn't. Oh, hi, Fred. How are you? Well, it's great to see you back. I was still Freddie. I was just little Martens kid, down the block. So,
Your dad's still painting, by the way?
yeah, my dad was still painting, but things were. This gave him a problem because all of his journeymen had gone to work at Caterpillar. Caterpillar had that big plant in Peoria. They were making tanks.
Right, wartime plant.
And tanks were more important than paint.
Absolutely.
So I think when I got home, I think he only had 2 or 3 men working for him, and they were older, the older guys.
So you're saying you got home, you hooked up with your brother now.
Now my brother comes in, and
That must have been a nice reunion.
yeah, that was great. So anyway, I was feeling down in the dumps one day, and what's the matter? Well, going to end up over in Japan. I figure, it's going to be at least 2 years before we get that mess cleaned up over there. And he says to me, "Oh, don't worry about it. You'll never get to Japan." Yeah, I'll get to Japan. No, you won't. Sure I will. Well, those arguments get dropped pretty quick. So anyway, but we had these 30 days to have fun. So now Peoria has the Illinois River running through it, and one of our relatives was my mother's first cousin. Had a cottage up at the Illinois Yacht Club on the thing. And as kids, we went up there all the time, went swimming and everything, and they had a lot of picnics and everything. So my brother and I and my girlfriend, she was still my girlfriend, Carolyn at that time, my cousin Catherine, who was
I bet she was glad to see you come
Oh,
back.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And Catherine, my cousin Catherine, who's about a year younger than I am, we were all going up there and go swimming. So we get in the car, pick up Carolyn, who lived about 2 blocks away, and then we drove down about a mile to pick up Catherine. And Catherine was watching for us, and she comes running out and all excited. And there's a phone call for John. Now, phone calls, at this time are invariably, they're very bad news. But she says, "This guy wants to talk to you right away." So John goes in, gets on the phone, and he comes out and he is higher than a kite.
This is your brother, right?
That's my brother. Well, the news was that they had dropped the bomb, and so this was something to celebrate. This is what he had been
So
working
you're talking
for.
about the bomb,
The first
atomic bomb in Hiroshima.
a bomb on Hiroshima.
Wow.
So anyway, rather than going up and going swimming, we went back and turned on the radio and tried to see what was happening and get all the news, because he was deeply involved in the development of that.
And you didn't know that, did you?
I had no idea. I didn't even know that there was such a thing. So anyway,
Probably the reason when you met him in New York, he didn't want he changed the subject on you.
yeah, he wasn't going to say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was those people in that bomb project were very tight-lipped about the whole thing.
Was your brother still a staff sergeant at the end of the war?
Yeah. He told me later. I said, couldn't you have gotten a commission? He said, well, if I had gotten the commission, they'd have moved me out of the program
Project,
for
yeah.
some reason or other. But anyway, it wasn't that much. It didn't mean that much to him. So
It meant a lot to you, though.
yeah,
So now, war's over, all right?
the war is over.
So they announced it. How much longer do you have to stay in, before that you're released in active duty?
Okay, I'll tell that.
All right.
Okay. I've forgotten exactly the day it was, but at the end of this furlough, this rest and recuperation, I went back to Rockford, and they had places for us, and we got there late one afternoon, and with not much to do and a lot of wondering what we were doing. There were a whole bunch of us there, and we were all assigned to come and meet in a meeting room, and we were going to be given some information, and we didn't know what would happen. I figured that since I was in the Troop Carrier Command and moving all this material and things like that, they'd send us over into the Pacific area, to help clean up and things like that. But anyway, this guy gets up there and he says, all right, he says, I'm talking to pilots, co-pilots, navigators, bombardiers, and crew chiefs. Those 6 classifications. And he says, some of you are going to be able to leave the service. He says, 1, do you have those classifications? They all had number, and I forgot what the numbers were. And he says, if so, you're still on board, or you still have a chance. He says, now, do you have 45 points? Now, you got points for being in the service for a month and being overseas and doing this and doing that, and 45 points, that was nothing. He says, okay, now the third is the most important. He says, do you want to get out? And you can imagine this room just exploding. Well, it didn't take him long to calm down because everybody wanted to start on the way to get back. Well, I got my discharge papers and the final payments and everything like that, and was dismissed. And I took a train over to Chicago, and then I took the rocket back down, and I was no longer a second lieutenant in the United States Army Air Corps.
Now you come back home. How do you readjust to civilian life after being in the military several years?
It didn't seem to me to be much of an adjustment. I got home. This was this was sometime now. By this time, it was in September, and I had made up my mind that I was going back to school and get my bachelor's degree, but most of the colleges it was too late to get in for the fall semester. And the one place I could get in was the University of Chicago, which was on the quarter system, and they started October 1st. So I applied up there, and I was accepted. So I finished up my bachelor's degree at the University of Chicago.
Very good. And we touched on something a little earlier, and you said you were going to get back to it, and that is, did you remain in contact with some of your, some of the people you served with?
No, I didn't. And when we left there at Westover Field in Massachusetts, I really didn't take any, make any effort to get names, addresses, and serial numbers, of these guys I had been flying with, because in 30 days we were all going to regroup. And I just didn't think much about, who do I want to contact again later in life. So that they were all gone. They all went their different ways, and I don't believe there was anybody in our squadron that went to Rockford. So I just missed all of those guys. And
keep them here, though, right?
Yeah, there were some nice guys there.
Did you, after, getting on, getting married, did you join in the service organizations like the VFW, American Legion, or anything like that?
No, I didn't do that. So, I guess, I don't know.
Reflecting back on all of it, I mean, when you really look back, 60 years back, how do those experiences affect your life?
I grew up awfully fast, and I got discipline that I would never have had. I can't say that I was, I can't say that I was an eager beaver in any way, shape, or form, but it helped me a great deal. Like everybody says, I wouldn't have missed it for anything, but I wouldn't do it again for for everything. So,
if there are life lessons to be learned from military service, what would you say they are?
It gives you some discipline, and it also gives you've got to be able to trust the guys you're working with. So, when I hopped on that plane, my life was in the hands of that pilot and co-pilot, and their life was in my hands too. I mean, I had to tell them where to go and how to get there. So, it was a teamwork.
Fred, I hope someday that your story will be spread, not only spread in the Library of Congress, but I hope that your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren will go there someday and see this interview, because you're a hell of a man. Thank you. And that concludes our interview with Second Lieutenant Frederick H. Martens, United States Army Air Corps. I'm sorry, Fred. 1942 to 1945. Thank you.